Good day, everyone. This is Tan Kee Wee with another update on what's happening in the world. I have been reporting on the growth of Chinese economy for a long time. These are two pictures, Spring Festival in 1975 and Spring Festival this year. It goes to show how much China has grown over the past many years. A lot of people think that, Kiwi, you are too pro-China. Actually, that's not true. I am just like the person who wakes up early in the morning in Santorini and tell everybody that the skies are brightening up because the sun is rising. It doesn't mean I'm pro Santorini. Why I'm saying that? Because he is actually trying very hard to foster peace in the world. Not because he wants peace, but because his attempt to save the US economy. It doesn't mean I'm pro-Trump. I'm just telling you what I see. Now, a lot of you think that Trump is crazy. You are not alone. A lot of people think that way. But there is a reason why Trump appears crazy. According to one article, it's the idea that if a leader is unpredictable, then he is capable of maybe extracting more from his counterparty. So Trump is, according to this idea, a bit like that. For instance, in January this year, Trump said that he wanted to deport a lot of Colombians back to Colombia. And the Colombians said no. So he threatened tariffs, travel bans, and visa revocations for all the Colombians in coming to US and living in US. And so they backed down and they allowed US to fly them illegal migrants back to Colombia. He asked for a lot, but in the end, he got a bit, but that's probably what he aimed for in the first place. It's the same with Panama. He threatened to take over the Panama Canal by force. Everything was settled after Panama said that, oh, we will not renew our deal to continue with BRI. And after C.K. Hutchinson sold their stake in Panama to BlackRock. And again, he threatened to take over all of Panama by force, but he got less. But probably that's what he wanted. Another crazy thing which he said was that he wants to make Gaza into the Riviera of Middle East. But if you look at it, he actually aiming for a ceasefire. Why? Because Netanyahu is the problem. He is determined to kill Palestinians. If the US take over Gaza, then the IDF will not be lobbing missiles into Gaza anymore. And the trouble is, the Arabs in the Middle East are not united. They're not doing anything to back their fellow Palestinians. So in a sense, by saying, I want to make Gaza the Riviera of the Middle East, he's kicked everybody into doing something. And the Arabs finally did something early this month. They come out with a counter proposal. They also want to help rebuild Gaza. Remember, before that, they were not thinking of that. So in a sense, what Trump is doing is he is slipping in a two-state solution for the Palestinians. Because Trump is good at distracting attention, telling you something crazy, and people react accordingly. But meanwhile, he carries out his real plan. For instance, he's very good at turning enemies into friends. Good example is North Korea. In the end, they became good friends in Singapore. You must also remember that Trump has many enemies and they want to kill him. And they try to kill him twice, if that's the truth. Now, it is very important if you have many enemies not to show your true side. So he hopes that he'll confuse his enemies. There is much more to Donald Trump. Just remember that he'll say crazy things to confuse us and maybe not reveal his motives, but he'll continue with what he wants to do. First of all, let's look at Trump. What does he want to do? He really wants to make America great again. That's always been his slogan. And actually, within 2 months of his presidency, changes have been seen. For instance, the racy ads are back. This is the latest Carl Jr.'s burger ads. They has a blonde, blue-eyed girl eating big burger. This is no longer a woke type of advertisement compared to, let's say, Bud Light. A year or two ago, it came out with this transgender person advertising Bud Light. And of course, what happened was Bud Light's sales crashed. Now Bud Light has come out with a more masculine advertisement using roughnecks. Whether they will pull their sales up again, that's another matter. Before Trump, that means we're talking about the neocons, the aim of the US was for a US empire, a world where USA is number one. Number two and number three must be way down, nowhere near number one. Before Trump, the US neocons had these two enemies and three proxies. The first one is Russia, and the proxy is Ukraine. Why Russia? The idea is to break up Russia into different parts. Russia has lots of resources, supposed to be $75 trillion. If you can overthrow and break up Russia into different states and provinces, you can exploit Russia just like they did in the 1990s. But of course, the battle of Ukraine is lost, or rather NATO has lost the war. And not only that, Russia in November last year demonstrated that it has a special missile, which is non-nuclear, but it is a hypersonic missile, and there's no answer from the West. Even if the war in Ukraine is over and the US and NATO wants to attack Russia, they have no chance of doing it, according to the missiles that Russia has demonstrated. The second enemy, which is China. This is the second enemy of the US empire. And what's the intention all these years of tackling China? Because they want China to be used as a source of cheap labor. So imagine cheap resources from Russia, sent over to China, get them to make them for the world. That's a perfect economic model. This is, of course, the proxy is Taiwan. And it looks like in the past year or two, there is very little chance of US victory if there's a war between China and USA. Why do I say that? Last September, that China demonstrated ICBM missile, because before that there were papers writing that Chinese missiles were not effective. So in last September, China demonstrated that its missiles can go very far and very fast. In the past 6 months to a year, of two incidents in the South China Sea showed that China has electronic dominance. There have been cases whereby this destroyer, which has about 36 hypersonic missiles, encountered a US carrier group, which has about 30 surface ships. Before any missiles are fired, they start tuning their radars to the enemies. What happened was that the US couldn't tune or focus onto the Chinese destroyer, and the Chinese destroyer could focus on all over US ships. It went on for days until the end decided that they cannot really win such an encounter, so they backed down. Twice it happened in the past year. November last year, China showed that it's got robotic soldiers. This is a game changer. That means all your years of training soldiers can be quite useless because these robots can hunt you. They don't need to sleep. They don't need to be fed. In January this year, China showed its 6th generation jet fighter. In combat mode, a 6th generation fighter can fly faster and higher. What this means is that I can hit you and you can't hit me. Of course, China hasn't gone into mass production yet, but this means that they are years ahead of the US fighter jets. Secondly, in February this year, China tested its new air-to-air hypersonic missiles. It can travel 1,000 kilometers. This is about more than 2 times the length of the longest distance US air-to-air missiles. So which means, again, I can hit you first before you can hit us. All these new weapons only goes to show that if there's a war between the US and China and South China Sea, China is likely to win. Let's move away from military sphere and move to economics. China is clearly ahead. The numbers tell us there's no need to argue. 1.4 billion people will easily overtake 335 million Americans. No one can match China's industrial capacity, whether it's in EVs, mobile phones. China is now the world's top exporter of caviar. They farm caviar now. In entertainment, China is doing very well. Today, 𝗵𝗂 2 is the fifth highest grossing film in history, behind Avatar, Avengers, Avatar again, Titanic, and has so far chalked in $2 billion. Now let's go to technology. China has overtaken the US. 20 years ago, the US led in 60 out of 64 technologies here, the blue line. But last year, or 2023, China has taken the lead. This is the red line in 57 out of 64 technologies. The US has many super apps, like YouTube and Google are still by far the most popular in the world. They wanted to put $500 billion into it to extend its superiority. I'm talking about AI. But of course, what we've just seen is that many other AI software that has come out of China has devastated OpenAI. And a third proxy to counter China and US, and that's Israel. Why Israel? Because in the Middle East, for a long time, the whole world depends on oil supply from the Middle East, China especially. So if you control the Middle East, you control global oil supply, you control China's oil supply, and also you disrupt global trade because everybody that goes through the Red Sea and Suez Canal. On top of that, Russia has an ambition, sort of their mini BRI. They wanted to tie up India to Iran to Russia. This is their IN. Now, if the US is there and controls it, this will not happen for Russia. China's Belt and Road initiative will be jammed too because it will be disrupted or there will be a backlog, a jam in the Middle East. So BRI cannot go to Africa. It's the same with the BRICS development as well. As African countries are important, if you control the Middle East, you delay the development of BRICS. Chaos in the Middle East is bad for Russia, China, but not so bad for the US empire and Israel. Why do I say that? Because Israel has a long-term expansion plan. Israel is here, but they have this ambition that they want to expand. It's reflected in many Israeli soldiers' armbands. Why are they trying to chase Palestinians out of Gaza? One reason is because there are a lot of oil and gas outside of Gaza. So Israel wants to tap on that. Israel also has this ambition to connect India to Europe through Saudi Arabia and through Syria. Again, for the European countries, they want stability in the Middle East in their favor because they want the gas from Qatar. After the Ukraine war and Russia cut off its gas to Europe, this potential pipeline to Qatar it has become more important. And of course, US oil sellers benefit because they are the world's largest producer of oil. So if oil prices goes up, they benefit. This, of course, all these reasons explain why the US empire supports Israel. But there's another reason. There's a lobby in US, and it's so powerful that they can keep Netanyahu safe when he traveled to the US. Unfortunately, Duterte has not got this protection. That Israel and USA, they are together, united, because both parties benefit from it. Just as in certain relationships whereby wealth and youth are exchanged. When Syria fell last December, this appeared to show that both US empire and Israel has gained an upper hand. Why do I say that? Because when Syria fell, Israel gobbled up more land from Syria. And this is part of the Greater Israel Plan. So it was beneficial to Israel. For the US, when Syria fell, the US a better position to control the Middle East and so thwart Russia and China's ambition for the BRI and their BRICS. The Syrian collapse has actually been not that rosy after all, because new issues have come up with the Turkish. Turkey was backing the current Syrian government, has this problem with the Kurds. This goes back to the Ottoman Empire, and Turkish people don't like the Kurds. They're spread inside Syria, Iraq, Iran, and a lot part of Turkey. And so Erdogan wants to get rid of them. And so now we have a potential clash between Turkey and Israel. If Turkey goes against Israel, the US will have to side Israel. But US, or Trump's US, don't want to side Israel anymore because Israel is weak, stretched, and faces extinction. The enemies of Israel are still strong. The Israeli troops are stretched. No investments are going to Israel. And a lot of Israelis are migrating out. Iran has shown that its missiles are superior to all the planes of Israel. So I speculate that Trump will have to make peace with Iran soon if it wants Israel to exist. Besides, Iran has got the full backing of Russia and China. So there's no point going to war with Iran. Sooner or later, I speculate that Trump will make friends with Iran to save Israel. All these developments show three things. Number one, the US cannot beat Russia in a war. Number two, US cannot beat China in a war. And so Trump's US wants to do less in the Middle East and concentrate on the US economy. The trouble is, Trump inherited many problems from the neocons. They overspent to maintain the US empire. They deindustrialized US economy. They pushed China and Russia together. And they started the threat against the US dollar. The US and the West sanctioned Russia. The question is, how do you counter the US empire? If you study carefully, the basis of the strength of US empire is the US dollar. Because you can print the US dollar and pay for military bases all over the world. So the way to undermine the US empire is de-dollarization. This is the real war between the superpowers. This started in October last year when they came out with a new currency. They call it the BRICS Pay. It's a new payment system using BRICS countries or currencies. But nothing is clear yet. They are still working on it. But it is almost certain that the common denominator between all the BRICS currencies is a black box. And what's in this black box? They say it's going to be a fiat currency or it's going to be cryptos. Okay? Already, de-dollarization is happening. Tether, which is a cryptocurrency. What is a Tether? Tether is a stable coin. Every Tether is equal to $1. But it is a cryptocurrency, meaning that if you send Tether around, it cannot be tracked. If you use Tether, you can avoid SWIFT and you can avoid US banks rules. Whereas if you use US dollar, you have to go to SWIFT and you have to go to US banks Tether. You give $1 US, you get one Tether. And with that, you can send to any trading partners all over the world. And the other side can eventually change his Tether back into US dollar. In the past 2 years, Tether has been boom in popularity. It has 42 million users and the daily volume is $190 billion. It's bigger than Visa. And of course, Tether could be, you say, the new currency of BRICS. But the trouble is, Tether is a private company and it has so far been unaudited. It is a company somewhere in Cayman Islands. So they say they exchange every dollar for a Tether, but who knows? They're unregulated. They could one day scam everyone else. In the end, yes, Tether is popular, but they will all go back to me. Gold is the ideal backing, but they won't say it. So all central banks are still buying in earnest over the past few years. It's not over yet. Now, you say some countries don't have gold. In fact, many countries don't have gold, but that's all right. They are coming out with the commodities exchange soon, maybe within a year or two. This means that if palm oil, I don't have gold, but in this commodities exchange, which is not manipulated by Chicago or London, you get your true value of your palm oil. Whereas in Chicago or London, sometimes they manipulate prices of coffee, cocoa to penalize the producer. If a BRICS comes out their own commodities exchange, then the fair price for palm oil. So if I don't have gold, but I have cocoa and palm oil, I can know my equivalent gold. And that would be a fairer system. With no need for the US in this new world, then people will dump the US dollar. There's no point. And foreigners hold $32 trillion of US financial assets. We're talking about financial, that means shares, bonds, and everything. If nobody wants to use US dollar, then there will be hyperinflation in the US economy. Interest rates will go up, and that will be bad for the US economy. The G7 currencies will also be dragged down because they are tied to the US dollar. The US empire countries are very deeply in debt. High rising interest rates will finish them off. There are too many problems facing the US. The economy is not producing. Public sector, banking sector, property sectors are all broken. US military is outclassed. The lobby groups in the US are too powerful and US dollar is threatened. These are the things that Trump inherited. If nothing is done, the train will go off the bridge sooner or later. When Trump came in, he's got a big problem in his hands. If he doesn't do anything, the US goes down the tubes. So he has to think of an out-of-the-box solution. And I speculate that he has come up with 3 answers. Number 1, retreat from empire, revive the US economy, and save the US dollar. Retreat from empire, that means forget about being the global cop. This was mentioned explicitly by Marco Rubio in January this year when he had an interview with Megyn Kelly. He said that the US cannot be a global cop anymore. He said that it's not normal to have a unipolar power. And he asked, why can't superpowers work together? This is revolutionary for a person like him to say that. He has always been a hawk. It's like a lifelong vegetarian asking you over for a barbecue. And you can see this is happening. US AID, a neocon arm, was dismantled. And then Voice America, Radio Free Europe, everything is closing down. And next, they'll go after Soros, NED, and maybe the FCI, no need because Tulsi Gabbard has taken over. And you also can notice it way back in January when all the neocon leaders in Europe, they were not invited to Trump's inauguration. Something is amiss. Why are these people not invited to Trump's inauguration? Another question I asked, have you wondered why Musk keep on criticizing Starmer? Because Trump's team realized that the British deep state has a big role in shaping US neocon thinking. Why do I say that? Actually, look back, British MI has outside influence. London is considered the spiritual capital of Western hegemony. It has influenced many US foreign policies. Trump doesn't like that, and they don't like Trump. Why do I say that? Because when Trump became president, there was this Russiagate incident. It was basically a fake story to show that Russia supported Trump. Apparently, UK's M16 is behind Russiagate. When Trump was president, he killed Soleimani. UK's M16 wanted Trump to escalate the conflict with Iran. Trump was shocked when he found out that M16 wanted to escalate the conflict, but he refused because his military advisor says that US cannot win such a war with Iran. Last October, UK Labour Party was caught sending 100 members to help Kamala Harris in the elections. 4 days before Trump became president, UK and Ukraine signed a deal, the 100-year accord. for £3 billion a year for 100 years. The Ukraine Zelensky will hand over the Ukraine's resources valued at $12 trillion. This is not explicitly stated, but a Czech newspaper spilled the beans after this was signed. So the question is, why did Starmer rush into this 100-year deal? Why can't he wait till Trump takes over? I speculate that actually it is not the US that's going after Russia. All along, it is the British who wants to go after Russia. And they have been so good, they use the US neocons as puppets. Now, what is the aim of going after Russia in the first place? To get Russian resources. But now the war is almost lost. So the next best thing is to grab the resources of Ukraine. But why? If you go back to last July, Ukraine defaulted on its bonds. So a lot of European bankers issued bonds based on winning Russia was caught. If you look back, the British Empire grew by exploiting other countries' resources. Years of fiscal irresponsibility has weakened the UK economy. It's going to implode like the US economy. You must continue to exploit. And that is, I speculate, the reason for starting the war against Russia. Russia cannot be won, so now just take away Ukrainian resources. Ukraine has some resources, about $12 trillion worth of it. Remember, after what happened, all this UK and EU, they had all sorts of meetings to say, oh, we have all sorts of summit. Why is the US pulling out of the war? Trump realized the game. He realized that 4 days before he became president, Ukraine has already signed away a lot of its resources to UK. Maybe UK has shared with the other European countries. So when all these leaders, Macron, Starmer, went to visit Trump in March, Trump probably is playing along with them. In fact, he already stated that out. In February, he sent his vice president, President Vance, to the Munich Security Conference. There, he told them that basically a new boss is in charge and we have new directions. That means all the European leaders, they were all groomed and put there by the previous US government. And basically he told them and say, no, we are changing direction. In other words, he should have sacked them, but you can't sack them, right? Because they have their own process of changing leadership. But basically, Trump is telling them, you're all fired. US wants to get out of NATO and Europe because there's no more benefit. The war is lost. So why continue to fight? Now, every action that US is going to do or Trump is going to do will have consequences. But today I won't touch on the consequences. I'll tell you what is Trump's revolution. And his revolution is get out of the US and revive the US economy. One way is to come up with tariffs. Tariffs today are, of course, less effective because China export less to the US now, and the US is also importing less from China. But look at the basic principle behind tariffs. If a pair of socks costs $3 in the UK and a pair of socks costs $3 in the US, and if the UK sells socks to the US at $4, then nobody will buy the socks, right? So basically the tariffs will make foreign goods more expensive. So the Americans will say, all right, if we can do it cheaper, let's do it. And so in a sense, you try to revive the US economy because the alternative is the whole US economy has been deindustrialized. How to revive the US economy? Cooperate with Russia. The second best solution is to work with Russia. And Russia is happy to invite American multinationals to help exploit Russian resources. Why not? Next, I speculate Trump will work with Xi Jinping. A lot of people say, no, this is not possible. Trump is making friends with Russia because he wants to team up with Russia and attack China. But do you seriously think that Russia will believe Trump will do that? Or the government after Trump will do that? The US has broken its promises so often. But let's put it in realistic terms. why US must work with Russia and work with China. Trump is doing all this and come out with anti-China slogans and attack because I believe he's trying to distract attention and please those China hawks in the US. But he has his plan. And what is his plan? He has mentioned before, he sees a world with 3 spheres of influence. Russia will be in charge of Europe, Eurasia, and China will take care of Asia. So instead of US being dropping from number 1 to nothing, he's happy to have US drop from number 1 to be one of 3. And of course, this has happened in history before. 100 years ago, the Western powers divided up China. 200 years ago, the Monroe Doctrine, whereby the US said, I look after the North and South America. You European powers don't step into America. And in the Berlin Conference in 1884, the European countries divided Africa. Everybody will rule according to what they have been allotted. So Trump is repeating this, except that now he wants 3 spheres of influence. The third one is save the US dollar, because the forthcoming BRICS currency will undermine the US dollar. How do you save the US dollar? If the US military is mighty, then simple, what the neocons have always wanted to do. Attack and defeat Russia and China. And once these 2 countries are defeated, you outlaw their currencies and say they only can use the US dollar. So the US dollar is safe. But this option is no longer viable. The new BRIC currency will be backed by commodities. I think it's basic gold by all the members' countries' commodities. The US is backed by nothing. So how do you save the US dollar? Then this brings up another crazy thing which Trump said. Remember his claim that he wants to annex Canada and take over Greenland? Actually, it's very easy. Canada has only a population of 41 million, and Greenland has a population of 50,000. But why Greenland and Canada? Look at the resources. Russia has 75 trillion. Greenland has 70 trillion. The US has 45 trillion, true. But all the environmental laws prevent taking those resources out of the US. Imagine if you take over Greenland, you have at your disposal 70 trillion of natural resources. And what the US national debt is 34. It more than compensates for what you owe the world. It's a good adventure to gobble up Greenland. Another thing to save the US dollar, which Trump has been trying to do, is to support Bitcoin. Gold is a limited analog asset. Bitcoin is a limited digital asset. And Bitcoin is being accumulated by Trump's team. They could accumulate it and push it up to $1 million per coin and make it legal tender. So all the US debts can be paid off using Bitcoin. Then you save the US dollar. In fact, a few weeks ago, Trump extended it, not just Bitcoin, but 4 other currencies, XRP, Sol, ADA, and Ether. That's his plan. In summary, a US military win over Russia and China is unlikely. US technological age is badly fading. De-dollarization will devastate the US economy. And so Trump has decided to take 3 actions. Prepare for a world with 3 spheres of influence. We cannot be number 1, but we can be one of 3. Revive the US economy through, among other things, tariffs. And of course, to protect the US dollar by putting natural resources to back it. So you gobble up Greenland. Is Trump really mad? He's reversing the neocons' work for the past 40 years. He's going to attack big businesses. He's introducing policies that many think are wrong. And he's going to grab Greenland. We don't really know. It's too early to judge. Some leaders are unpopular and hated during their lifetimes. But after many years, we look at them and their times, and we think those were turning points in history. History tells us that this has happened before. The first emperor of China, when he united China, he was emperor for 12 years. He did many bad things. He burned all the books. He killed a lot of people who opposed him. And when he died, they burned down his tomb. That's where we got the terracotta warriors. But today he's seen as the father of China. So what does a Trump presidency mean? Definitely, if he's aiming for peace, there's no going to be no nuclear war in the next few years until the next president comes. If a new world with 3 spheres of influence takes shape, then I think we will live in a more peaceful and prosperous world. Vance will probably continue with his policies. It's still unknown. But Trump probably wants to carry out what he wants to do within the next 4 years. In fact, some people think that he's eligible for a Nobel Peace Prize. He has cooled US-North Korea tensions. He's brought through ceasefire to Gaza. And just yesterday, he brought partial ceasefire to Ukraine. History will remember Trump not as a fool, but as an American hero if he's able to carry out all his plans. Thank you very much.